Well, President Obama has announced his plans to pledge $50 million to the Pakistani media. The aim being to reverse anti-American sentiments and raise awareness of U.S.-funded projects meant to better the quality of life for every Pakistani. But the notion of branding aid already has a lot of critics who worry that publicly announcing which projects the U.S. has paid for might backfire. So will funding our own media projects really change anyone's mind? Well, here to discuss it with me, I have the author of the blog, Anushay's Point, Anushay Hussain. Anushay, thank you for being here. Now, let's listen to the way they describe this. U.S.-sponsored media to build a brand for America. That sounds a lot like propaganda to me. Would you say that's right? Or do they actually have a right to defend themselves against all the anti-American media that's out there?
Well, I think that's a really good question, and I think the answer to that would be both. I think this is what it is, a $50 million PR move, foreign PR experiment, I guess you could call it, in Pakistan. But at the same time, USAID has hundreds and hundreds of really excellent programs on population and health, on democracy and governance, and I think it's fair that those programs, you know, get their fair share of coverage.
But do you think then that perhaps other people will look at those media outlets that are working with the U.S. government, that are getting this aid, and only point more fingers, only say that now you're working hand in hand, you're in the pocket of the U.S. government?
I think that's a very good question, and I think that's a really realistic possibility. South Asians are notorious for being conspiracy theorists, so I definitely think that there's a risk in that. Post 9/11, it's always been like that in the Muslim world, you know? It's kind of a catch-22 for the U.S. They're working with like local media groups, local NGOs, any people on the ground. You always have to be careful because those are accusations that could be hit at you.
So with this new program, do you think that they have any chance of it working, of convincing the Pakistani people to trust America?
You know, maybe. We don't know. We'll have to see how it all works out. But at the end of the day, I think the U.S.'s actions are much more important than their words, than their PR moves. I mean, there's a really large issue of the war that's raging in Afghanistan next door, of the tensions in the Afghanistan-Pakistan border, of the drone attacks that the U.S. are conducting in Pakistan. There's a huge issue of mounting civilian casualties. So I think ultimately that is what the U.S. is going to be judged on, not their millions and millions of dollars that they pour into, you know, the publicity that they're trying to buy.
But aside from the publicity, I mean, they're pouring millions of dollars into new programs, into aid, to help infrastructure, education, energy. Do those not count?
No, of course they do, and that's what I said earlier. I think that it's really important that these kinds of programs that USAID has, you know, receives coverage. But USAID has been doing these programs not just this year. It's been going on for over 30, 40 years. I know in Bangladesh since 1971, the U.S. has poured almost $5 billion in aid. And it's even more in Pakistan. You know, you've got your U.S. aid, but you also have military aid. So, of course, the positive work that the U.S. does definitely deserves its fair share of coverage.
And, I mean, for years, you said they've been pouring aid for years into Pakistan, but for years, hasn't the media been very skeptical of America? And do they actually help shape the thoughts of the people there?
Well, I think definitely they do, but you have to understand that the U.S.-Pakistan relations have changed. It wasn't always like this. The Pakistan role in the U.S., the relationship has changed since this Afghanistan war. You know, you've got drone attacks that the U.S. is committing inside Pakistan. So yes, the media, of course, shapes what the public views, but also, like I said before, you can buy the coverage that you want, but people are ultimately going to judge not what they read, but what they see.
And, well, speaking, though, of coverage, do you think that if there do become more of these news outlets that are perhaps a little friendlier to America, then can we just see a counter to that? Because we've done a discussion on Pakistani media before here on the Alona Show, and we've discussed the stark differences in how there almost is a Fox and an MSNBC. Yes. And so then will there be a Fox-like equivalent that just starts pointing even more fingers, coming up with even more conspiracy theories, and being perhaps 10 times as harsh?
I think that that's a very valid point, and I think that that's definitely a realistic possibility. There's always a risk of backlash when you are working with the U.S., especially in such a sensitive climate. The war in Afghanistan has spilled on to Pakistan, and you can't deny that.
But do you think, have you heard any reports so far of whether the Pakistani government itself supports this program of the $50 million in aid to the media?
Well, actually, it's very interesting because I was reading how Pakistani officials, high-level Pakistani government officials, were reassuring the U.S. and pretty much guaranteeing that, you know, this passage of the Kerry-Lugar Bill, which basically gives $50 million for this kind of media work in Pakistan, they were assuring the U.S. that this was going to be celebrated in Pakistan, that the Pakistani people were going to be very happy about it. And, you know, I think we all know that government officials don't always reflect what the people think. So we have yet to see if the passage of this bill is going to be celebrated in Pakistan or not.
How many people in Pakistan actually read a newspaper or watch TV?
Well, I'm sure the majority of the people do, but, you know, you've got the issue of the population in the rural areas, and those are the people, and that is the area where the civilian casualties are actually mounting. And I think those people are exactly the people whose hearts and minds that you have to win over. And they're not going to be making their judgments based on what they're reading and what they're seeing on TV. If even they have access to media, they're going to be seeing by who's getting hit next door by U.S. bombs.
Exactly. So if they're the people that are most affected, is all hope lost in this program?
Well, you know, let's not be too negative here. We don't know. I mean, maybe there is a possibility. We have to, I think the U.S. needs to be clear about exactly who they're trying to target. Are you trying to target the people, you know, in the cities, in the urban populations? Or are you trying to target the people in the rural areas? Which is why, you know, it's what I said earlier. This is what it is. It's a $50 million PR stunt. Let's see how it falls out.
All right, Anushay, thank you for being here. A $50 million PR stunt. That's right. Barack Obama is proposing a plan to give $50 million to media outlets in Pakistan so that the U.S. can now change the people's perceptions. But there are a lot of criticisms, and we have to see if this plan has any chances of actually working.